All right, another episode of Under Further Review here, and we're in the heart of the college football playoff, the quarterfinals right around the corner. Before we jump into that, just throwing out a reminder to follow us on all apps, especially Instagram, Under Further Review Pod, TikTok. We're on YouTube, so subscribe there, and wherever else. I think we have a Twitter page that I've been using, going back and forth about this Michigan coaching search on there. And that's where I wanted to start. Kyle Whittingham from Utah has been hired as the Michigan's 22nd head coach in the program's history, I believe. And it's been a roller coaster of the month of December for Michigan. And there's been a lot of reports about, will they get DeBoer? Will they get Dillingham? And that didn't really work out. I think the DeBoer side was more because Alabama won the first game in the playoff and Michigan didn't really want to wait for him. But I think he was priority number one the entire time. The Dillingham stuff, I don't know if that ever came into fruition. I think he was going to stay with Arizona State the entire time, and he was kind of using Michigan as leverage. And reports came out later that Michigan never really offered Dillingham a contract, so I don't think they really got too deep into the conversations about him becoming the Michigan coach. Whittingham, a lot of hams in this whole coaching search. Ham ends up being the guy. He's been fantastic over the course of, I believe it was 21 seasons with Utah. I've been searching up and down social medias because usually when a hire like this, especially with a big program like Michigan happens, there's back and forth reviews about who they're getting. I honestly haven't seen a negative thing about Kyle Whittingham. It's pretty incredible that someone can come into a program like Michigan that has a lot of question marks up in the air right now, and there isn't even one bad thing. And I've looked across the platform. Every college football media personality, every football media personality, even been looking at like the rival schools like Ohio State, like Michigan State, all their fans. And there hasn't been much negatives, if any at all. So it feels like it's the proper hire for Michigan. They needed somebody who was going to add accountability to this program. Obviously, it wasn't happening with Sharon Moore, but before I get into my whole spiel, because I have a lot of thoughts on this whole Michigan search and like what the future is for this program, I wanted to hear from you guys because you guys are the outside looking in, and I'm very aware that I can probably be a little biased towards Michigan at times. So I'll give my fandom, thoughts afterwards, but I'll let you guys go first.
So I'll lead off. I think it's a good hire. It wasn't the splashy hire that I think a lot of people would have expected. In all fairness, I think he's a good coach. What he did with Utah is unmistakable. I mean, it wasn't a very good program before he got there, and he went in. I think it was 2009 was when he beat Alabama in, what was it, the Sugar Bowl. I mean, he's a stout coach, good recruiter. My concern with the hire, and Steve made a good point about it when I did bring it up with him, is at 66, how long are you going to get out of him? And Steve made a very good point, which it's the truth. If right now Michigan's trying to get back on track and just be, get an even keel coach that's not going to do anything wrong. And this is the guy. He's squeaky clean. And Steve said it best. If you can get 4 or 5 years out of him, and he builds the program and brings them back from what Sharon Moore's, you can get that taste out of your mouth, then he's done his job. And that's true, because I think that's probably what he is 4 or 5 years. I know there are guys that'll go a lot longer, but I think 4 or 5 years, and if he can get, I don't want to say back on track, because they really aren't off track. And I know I've seen that places where people are like, oh, he's going to get them back on track. I don't know. Michigan's not off track. I mean, it's not long ago they were a national championship game, and so I think it's a great hire in that regard. Like I said, my concern was the age, and the last couple years have been a little spotty for him. But again, it is Utah. They're not a huge financial institution. He's going to have a lot of resources that he's never had before at his disposal, which I am interested to see what he does. He's going to have a lot of recruiting dollars. We'll see how it looks when he retains or who he retains. It looks like I did see Bryce Underwood said he's interested to see where he goes, where this goes, and what he does and such. Maybe Bryce is going to stay. If he doesn't, even if Bryce Underwood, just be in all fairness, if he did leave, I have no doubt that he could find a quarterback to play. I think it's a good hire. It wasn't the big splashy hire that I know a lot of Michigan fans are making it up to be. It's not a splashy hire, but I don't think Michigan needed a splashy hire. They needed someone that was squeaky clean, that was going to steady the ship and take them to, just get them going in the right direction. and get really just what Sharon Moore just did in a short period of time, because that's going to linger for a little bit. I think he'll steady it. It'll become an afterthought, and that'll be that. I think it's a good hire.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I mean, I didn't know much about him until looking him up really today. I saw that he was the coach at Utah for a little while, or for quite a
long while.
a long while, but he kept the program very formidable for those years, and you're not really hearing anything bad about him. So, and I feel like that's a guy that Michigan is really needing at the moment with how the past. I mean, Harbaugh was a very good coach, and just near the end had those allegations and everything. So, and then more of obviously with all his stuff. So, I think they just need somebody to stabilize that program because it is one of the biggest programs in college football. So, yeah, I think it's a good hire and to stable the ship for a couple of years, and then I mean he might even have a coordinator that he grooms into being a head coach at one point too. So
Steve also said that, which I forgot to bring up.
so
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
just one.
it's the current offensive coordinator at Utah is looking like he could be the next I just said it, the next offensive coordinator. Also, they're looking at the defensive coordinator from BYU. I just read. So there's going to be a mix up of the staff a little bit, but I think there's some names that you got to keep as well. Tony Alford, the running back coach at the moment, being one of them because that running back room is too good, and a lot of people respect Tony Alford, and I think he would be claimed right away if he was to part ways with Michigan. But just going back to a few of the things, he did sign a 5-year contract, so whether or not he does serve that entire 5 years, that's up for question. But it was a pretty financially sound contract that he received. I believe he's now the 8th highest paid coach in all of college football, which is an
Yeah, did I see 8.5 annual?
Yeah, 8.5 mil a year. That's definitely an upgrade from what Utah can offer because they do not have the financial means that a university like Michigan does. But just going back, several years ago, because if you ask anybody from the outside looking in, they're going to say that this is a mess, that Michigan is a disaster, that they're one of the most corrupt programs out there. But as a Michigan fan, I would never apologize for winning the 2023 national championship because a lot of people tried to attack the person on top of the mountain, but just look at the talent that Michigan brought back in 2023, what ended up going to the NFL, the talent that was there afterwards that got drafted in the first round, the Mason Grahams of the world, Colston Loveland, the Kenneth Grant. That was just a stacked roster. They made the conscious decision together to come back and take another run at a national championship. It all started with like when Blake Corum came back and made that announcement, and then Michigan was looking for money to pay to other athletes, and they found a way to do it. So whether you want to say that they had the upper hand because of the sign stealing allegations, that's up to you as a college football fan. But what Connor Stalions did, we cannot deny, kind of upgraded college football as a whole, because if you remember, a lot of offenses were holding up signs on the sidelines, and that was the whole point of Connor Stalions' role, was to figure out what those signs said and what play was coming next. Now they have communications into the helmets, which the NFL had for years. High school football even had communication in the helmets at the time. And it's just sad that college football was so far behind. I understand the reasoning. They felt like some of the other schools, the smaller schools, would not have the opportunity to have that same type of communication that maybe a school like Michigan would have. But at the end of the day, it was the step that football in general was going in. And now they have it across college football. So whether you think that's cheating or not, what happened, again, up to you. But the whole Sharon Moore thing, and a lot of players said it during their interviews, it's not one person. I know it's the head coach and he's at the top tier of them, or he's on top of the mountain, but they're not going to let one player or one coach define this entire program. They're focused on winning this bowl game, and then they're going to have conversations with Whittingham and try to move forward from this. But in the beginning of the month, when we were sitting there with Sharon Moore, I would sit there and watch interviews, and I told myself, this is a talented team coming back next year, but do we have a talented head coach, was my question. Because this roster this year just felt like it, week in and week out, could have blown out a lot of teams, and they didn't do that. Barely squeaked by Northwestern. Had a hard. It was It was a fight with Purdue, who I think came in last place in the Big Ten this season. Like, just games like that kind of had you concerned. And they couldn't get the job done against Oklahoma. They couldn't get the job done against USC. They couldn't get the job done against, obviously, Ohio State, which was the rival game. And Sherrone Moore looked kind of off now that you look back at it this entire season. During interviews, he didn't bring the same juice that he usually does. Questionable calls left and right on the sidelines. And now you see reports coming out that he was getting into altercations with like Wink Martindale and several other members on the coaching staff. So it sounds like it was a mess for several months. And that's not something that just stays in the coach's office. When you see the head coach visibly leaving a meeting upset with tears in his eyes, players are seeing that. And then when rumblings come around that somebody is cheating with a staffer, that's going to make the locker room very tense. Somebody wrote this the other day. Michigan's kind of failing upward with this hire because you go from Sherrone Moore, who was kind of a third base hire. You know, he was the offensive coordinator on Michigan staff under Harbaugh. A lot of people thought he should be hired because he was going to be able to retain recruits and keep that roster as is off of that championship run. And he also coached at the end of the season when Harbaugh got his suspension. So he coached in the Penn State game, I believe the Maryland game, and maybe not the Maryland game, Penn State game, definitely. And then the Ohio State game he coached in. So, you know, there were several big contests that Sherrone Moore was the head coach for. So a lot of people felt like he was ready. I don't think he was ever ready. Now you're bringing in a 66-year-old coach who was actually under Urban Meyer as the defensive coordinator at Utah before Urban Meyer left for Florida. And Urban Meyer has been very vocal about Whittingham and what his abilities are. And he actually, at the time when he left for Florida, he, you know, wanted Whittingham to be the next guy. He wanted him to be the head coach. So he's always talked highly about Whittingham his entire time at Utah. I think it's because he plays in the Pac-12 and it can get lost in the competition's not as high as the Big Ten. It's not as high as the SEC. They play at later times. So we don't hear about these Utah teams as much. But what is Utah football? It's Michigan of the West Coast. Whittingham is bringing in a physical, defensive-minded team that's going to run the ball a lot. And that's essentially what Michigan's been for years now, because somebody's argument's been, you know, Utah hasn't had a quarterback drafted by the NFL. Okay, that might be worrisome for some, especially when you have Bryce Underwood as, you know, your quarterback, and he obviously wants to get to the NFL. But to me, it's because he found other ways to win. It's the same thing that Harbaugh was up until J.J. McCarthy. I mean, who was getting drafted from the, the Jim Harbaugh era? I don't think you can really name a quarterback. I can't think of one. It was a lot of guys who were undrafted rookies, you know, playing in the Canadian leagues, stuff like that. You know, Michigan's been known to out physical teams. And now you have a guy like Whittingham coming in, and he has Jordan Marshall in his running back room. He has Savion Hyder coming in, the top ranked running back in the nation. And there's talks of Justice Haynes coming back. You just have to really try to retain Underwood, because I think a year is going to do him well. And now that he's on under Whittingham, I think he should grow as a quarterback. Hopefully, the other big name's Andrew Marsh, because there's been a lot of rumors about him entertaining offers from other schools, and he's probably one of the best receivers I've seen from Michigan in a while. So that's the next step, essentially. You know, he has to retain these players, and he has to retain the coaching staff that matter towards recruiting, in my opinion.
Biff. We need Biff.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of players have been protesting for Biff. A few of them even said they wanted him as the head coach. So, you know, the one takeaway you can, or there's several takeaways you can kind of gather from today's interviews. One thing is the togetherness they talk about. So I don't know if you guys saw, Penn State had 30-something opt-outs for today's game. Michigan only has 3 at the moment, and they said that's all they're expecting for this bowl game. The fact that they're able to carry an entire roster and only 3 people are Barham, Derek Moore, and El Hadi, who are all looking to go to the NFL draft, and they're all seniors. If you can keep this roster together for this bowl game, they can do well against a Texas team who's pretty depleted right now. They just lost their top running back to the portal, and countless others went to the NFL draft or the portal. If they can walk away with a win and get some feel-good vibes, maybe the players are sitting down and they're like, all right, we have something special here. We have a really established coach coming in. The future is looking bright for this team. But the biggest thing is the accountability that he's going to bring. Because I don't think there was much of that happening under Sherrone Moore during his time.
Yeah, I mean, it's the big thing with him and retaining talent. I want to go back to that real quick. Is I don't want to like Utah had the 37th recruiting class this past year, or going into next year, 2026. So I haven't I've seen some people saying the opposite of what we're saying in terms of recruit. Oh, it's different recruiting in the Big Ten versus the Big 12, and I agree, it is wholeheartedly, it is. But the guy had the 37th recruiting class in the nation. I just want to put this out there in the Big 12 with a school that isn't money dominant. And also, who's to say that some of those fours that he has over there aren't going to jump ship and come with him to Michigan? I know that people say geographically, Utah, it's not going to work out. Most of them are Utah based, but who's to say it doesn't? Who's to say that these guys don't want to follow him and come to Michigan, even if Michigan loses some recruits, which it doesn't look like, like Steve said, it looks like they're all on board as of now. I know it's only been a day or two. I mean, I honestly, from a recruiting standpoint, my concern with him always was going to be the age, but from a recruiting standpoint and team building, he does play I don't a physical, I call it like a rugged style of football. I can't see how anybody could beat the higher up. This one's good. I think this one's a good hire. I think it's actually better than what we were talking about in the last episode. I think he's more fit for the job than what we discussed, in all fairness. And it is pretty good because the one thing I was impressed by, and I said this to Steve, was he left Utah and he's with the Michigan football team for the bowl game. He's obviously not coaching it, but he's with the team. Like that's a guy that he's been the head coach for, has it even been 2 days yet? I don't think it has. I'm sorry. It's been a long 2 days.
Today it was announced.
Yeah, and he's already left his former team and he's with his new team. Again, obviously not coaching, or maybe he is, I don't know, but he's already working to retain the talent. He knows what he needs to do. I don't know how you can't love that, in all fairness. And I'm not a Michigan fan at all, but I don't know how you can't love that. Like the guy's already boots on the ground.
To jump in, Mike, two things from what you just said. I think the timing was everything. If the portal wasn't opening up on January 2nd, I think Michigan would have taken their sweet time with this search. But the fact that, the Sharon Moore, I can't say it, Moore thing happened at the beginning of December when they were preparing for a bowl game, and then the portal was right around the corner. It was kind of like urgent to find a name that was going to come to this program, because you better believe that January 2nd portal did open up without a head coach hired. You probably lose more than half of this roster, if not 75% of this roster.
It would have been picked clean, 100% picked clean.
And that comes down to also the players as well, because I would think that I know they want to get past this bowl game, but the appropriate thing, especially like a Bryce Underwood of the world, would to tell Michigan if he was leaning towards opting out or if he was leaning towards entering the transfer portal, because there's a lot of QB talent in that portal right now. And you better believe they're getting offers left and right now. And some of them might even have something set in stone, but they can't make it official until the transfer portal opens up. So Michigan's losing out if they don't get a confirmed yes or no from Underwood. But the other thing is the recruiting. So yeah, the 37th overall class, they actually have the 34th ranked recruit in the nation, a 97 overall 4-star recruit who's an offensive tackle. That'd be great. But if you look up and down this list, it's a lot of Utah players. So he was really only recruiting within his area.
And he believes in a pipeline for sure.
Yeah, but I also think a lot of people are like, oh, he only knows that territory. It's going to be tough going to Michigan. I don't think that's necessarily what it was. I think he was just getting a lot of kids who wanted to stay close to home, and they took, maybe they took a small hometown discount to stay with that program. Once you get to Michigan, I always talk about the facilities. I talk about, it's the big house, it's the biggest stadium, the program with the most wins, but also what that NIL package is going to be. I think guys like Carter Meadows, who's a 5-star defensive end, the reason he's saying he's confident about the future is because he got a pretty fat payday by coming to Michigan. Savion Hyder's probably going to be the same thing. You did see 3 4-star recruits leave, but that's probably because some guys came in when they saw Sharon was getting fired and said, hey, we'll up that pay a little bit if you come over to us. It's going to be tough for like Underwood of the world. I think you're going to have to open up the purse a little bit on like Andrew Marsh, because he's going to get a lot of people offering him rather big paydays. But Michigan has it by all means, and now they can finally have those conversations, because the report that came in before they made this hire was they weren't talking about any contracts or like financial commitments until they hired a head coach, which was going to put them at a major disadvantage if they didn't make a signing quick. So yeah, Michigan has their coach, feeling pretty good about it. Kyle Whittingham, established coach. A lot of people put them in or put him in their top 10 to 15 coaches in all of college football. If you see any article or write up, he's just well respected across the board. And that's what Michigan really needed. It. They needed that guy who's going to come in as a respected individual. And again, I use that word accountability. He's going to hold his players accountable. He's going to hold his program accountable. And you can't not like his physical, blue collar, hard nosed style of playing. It's just, it fits what Michigan's been for so long. And now it gives them that 4 or 5 year window where, you know, a lot of people think he's going to keep them in that top 12, top 15 every year. But once he's ready to retire, there you bet there's going to be some young head coach that's going to be ready to go in waiting. So the future is just feeling pretty good for Michigan after a eerie month where it didn't feel so great. I didn't get to announce in the beginning, but I did have the Dan Wolken interview that I did in the beginning of the week, and it was before they made a hire, but I do want to get it out there because he took the time to join our show, and the pretty awesome beat writer from Yahoo, or senior writer actually from Yahoo, and it's been around the game for a while. And he talked about the Michigan coaching search, but he also talked about the college football playoffs and the quarterfinals that are coming up. So I think I'll send it over to that interview real quick before we start talking about college football playoffs, and then we'll come back and we'll preview. Yeah, really excited to bring in Dan Wolken of Yahoo Sports, college football writer. And I want to get into a lot of things today. I'm excited because I've seen you talking on social media, and you've been talking about the Michigan coaching search a little bit, but you also been talking about, the college football playoffs, and that's the time of year that we're in. And the transfer portal is about to open up. A lot happening in college football. I will start with Michigan because right now it feels like it's kind of in flux. It's kind of chaotic, this coaching search, where Sherrone Moore gets fired. Everybody knows the story by now. He was being unfaithful to his wife. He was with a staffer for several years. But then there was two names that instantly pop up in Kenny Dillingham and DeBoer from Alabama. But now it's starting to seem like they're going to have to shift gears a little bit, start looking at plan B, plan C, maybe even plan D in the coaching search, because Kenny Dillingham just signed with Arizona State. Some people are saying rumblings that he didn't even get an offer. And also DeBoer just won his first game with Alabama in the playoffs. So like, how likely would either of those be? Not, it sounds like 99% chance that they're not getting both either of them. So where does Michigan stand in your opinion?
Yeah, and I would say for all the people who, when Sherrone Moore got fired, thought, somehow that the timing of it was strategic, or that, Michigan wanted to get through signing day for the recruiting class or something like that. I mean, clearly that's not the case. I mean, this is a disaster in terms of the timing,
Yeah.
strictly on the timing. And it's one of those situations where, the coaching carousel really now takes place in November. Everything is kind of lined up by Thanksgiving week. And once you get beyond that, it gets really hard. And obviously, a lot of schools with coaches who were prominently mentioned for other jobs, just as an example, Clark Lee at Vanderbilt, Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State, their administrations wanted to get them locked up to extensions and had been working on that for weeks. And so Michigan is in a tough spot with the timing. I think they'll get a good coach because it's a great job. I think it's one of the top 5 jobs in the country, especially now in this era of NIL. They've got a lot of money to spend. They've got really invested boosters who are willing to help them build out their roster. So I really do think Michigan in the long run will be fine. But this is not an ideal time to hire a coach. And certainly some of the people that they had targeted or that maybe they had wanted are just not going to be available because of timing. I mean, Kalen DeBoer, to even really talk to him, you'd have to wait until January 2nd. And I just don't think they're going to do that. So, now you may have to start to look at guys like Jed Fish from Washington. He's been mentioned a lot. The Biff Poggi option, where he's kind of the interim for a period of time. I don't particularly like that option, but it's certainly something you have to think about at this point, given the timing. So Yeah, I don't know exactly what they're going to do. I think they do need to probably spend this week in a little bit of a reset mode and just kind of rethink who their candidate pool is going to be and try to maybe get something done by New Year's, but it's certainly not going to be easy.
Yeah, you mentioned a few names there, and I wanted to get your opinion on them because when you think Michigan, like you said, you certainly believe it's a top five, hiring or school at the moment for coaching. That they have the facilities. I'm sure they have an endless NIL that they can offer and a big contract for the next coach, and they're probably going to have to dish out a big contract at this point. But when you bring up a guy like Biff Poggi, it kind of reminds me of the Sherrone Moore era where Harbaugh leaves for the Chargers. They don't want to lose all their players that are coming back from that national championship team, so they bring in Sherrone Moore, who has connections with those players. And outside of Keon Sabb, who is on Alabama at the moment, there wasn't really major transfers from that group. It kind of feels like Biff Poggi, if he were to be hired right now, that's the sole reason that you'd be hiring him is the connections he's built with those players and being able to keep that roster, who, mind you, they bring back Jordan Marshall and they have the top running back commit coming in. They still have Bryce Underwood. That they have their entire offensive line coming. There's a lot of talent coming back next year for this team. So, like, if you lose that, like, you could be sent back a season or two. But outside of that, like you brought up Jed Fish, a lot of people, when you read the comments online, they're like, "Oh, that's not the home run hire that you expect from Michigan." But whenever you see a beat writer, analyst, anyone in college football, they have nothing but high praise to say about Jed Fish. And the last name I want to throw your way, because he seems to be coming up recently, Kyle Whittingham, the former Utah coach. Are you a little worried? Like, would you be worried by his age? He's somebody that maybe only has like 5, 10 years left that he can be with the program.
Well, I think that at this point in college football, you can't expect that you're going to have a coach for 20 years anymore. Like, that's just not realistic. Everything moves too fast. There's way too much pressure. The jobs are just not set up, I think, anymore for many people to be a Bo Schembechler or to be a Joe Paterno. I just don't think that's realistic. If you can get 5 to 7 years out of a good coach, I think that's pretty good. And the Whittingham option, if I were Michigan, is certainly something I would look at. I don't think he's lost his fastball. They went 10-2 this year. They were a very good team. And he's been really good for a long time. I mean, there's been ups and downs at Utah like there has at a lot of programs, but I mean, they've had a ton of success. And he's a hard-nosed, line of scrimmage, run the football, play defense coach, which I think does translate well potentially to the Big Ten. I think he's got more to give. When he left Utah, it was not a retirement. It was not anything like that. It was really that Morgan Scalley, who had been the head coach in waiting, they were getting concerned he was going to leave because he had just been waiting so long to finally take over, and Witt hadn't stepped away. I think he kind of sensed that maybe Utah was ready to just hand the keys to Morgan Scalley, and he made it very clear that if he had a good opportunity, he would be wanting to coach again. So I'm not concerned about his age. Like, he's obviously like in great physical shape. I think he's still motivated. I think he'd be a very reasonable option for Michigan. And, the whole idea of a home run hire, there's just not a lot of guys out there who are at the level of, say, when Urban Meyer went to Florida, everyone knew that was going to be a home run. Those kind of guys are just not necessarily out there anymore, or at least right now. So the opportunity to get a coaching free agent like Kyle Whittingham, who is kind of ready-made for that job, and say it's a 5 years, I would do that because I think he would win.
Yeah, I have one more name I want to throw your way because I've been thinking about it. Dan Lanning's one of my favorite coaches in all college football. I just love what he's done with the Oregon program. I keep saying Oregon throughout the week. And Ryan Day, obviously, he was the assistant for Urban Meyer, and then once Urban Meyer left, he was promoted to head coach. What about, and I've seen his name recently, but this entire coaching search, I've been thinking like best assistant coaches throughout college football. And right from the start, I told myself, I was like, if they have a chance at Glenn Schumann, I would go for it. What's your thoughts on that? Would you take a chance on a Glenn Schumann with the current roster in place and what Michigan is?
Yeah, it's always interesting when you're talking about an assistant who's never been a head coach before. We can look at a lot of the guys who are super successful right now. Kirby Smart at Georgia, Dan Lanning at Oregon. They got their first head coaching job at big programs, and they had never been a head coach before, and it worked out great. So I wouldn't necessarily be afraid of that. I don't necessarily have enough of a feel for Schumann as a program builder and as a coach to know how he would do. He's a pretty low-key guy, and I do think it would be a big adjustment for him to be kind of the front-facing personality of a program the magnitude of Michigan. I don't want to say whether he would do well or not. I really don't know. I mean, you're rolling the dice. It's a reasonable thing to throw out there because he's been with Kirby Smart a long time. He knows what it looks like to be successful at a program at that level and how you've got to recruit and how you've got to build out a defense. I've heard worse ideas. I just don't really know or have much of a prediction for how that would work.
Yeah. No, it all makes sense. Last question on Michigan. What's your general feel on the program? It surprises me that the biggest transfer is the backup quarterback at this point. And also only 3 players have opted out: El Hadi, Barham, and more. So, do you feel like once that portal opens up, we're going to see a lot of players leave? Or at this moment, do you feel like Biff Poggi's done a pretty good job of handling the situation?
Yeah, I think it's probably a little too early to read too much into it because you do have a coach likely going into place by the time the portal opens, which I'm sure will make a decision for kids who might be on the fence right now and who just kind of don't want to get into the portal yet. So there could be more losses. That's the way of the world, though. That's just kind of how all of these coaching transitions tend to go at this point in college football history. So I don't know if I would base a decision on who's most likely to keep guys from going in the portal. Like, I just think you've got to take a little bit of a longer term view than that. Cause you also have to remember whoever you hire will get guys in the portal if they want them, and Michigan's got a lot of resources. So I don't worry too much about that. But look, Michigan as a job, as a program right now, I think they've truly been elevated by the NIL stuff because for a long time, Michigan at least projected the image of a program that didn't necessarily want to play in the gray area. And, whether that was true or not, you will get a lot of differing opinions on that. And certainly in the Jim Harbaugh era, there was a NCAA recruiting violations case. I think Harbaugh and his staff were definitely gray area guys. But the thing about NIL is you can kind of do it out in the open now. And Michigan is as well backed financially as almost any program in college football when you consider who their alums are. And I saw this stat the other day. There's 10 billionaires who are alums of the University of Michigan. Some of them, like Stephen Ross, who owns the Miami Dolphins, Larry Ellison, they're directly involved in some of this stuff. And so when you have access to that kind of money, I think it really takes your job from, maybe Michigan was somewhere between 10 to 15 best job in the country. I think now they're top 5.
Ross is the business school, right there? Is that named after the owner?
Yeah, I'm not familiar enough with the University of Michigan on the non-sports side, but yes, I'm pretty sure he's got his name on some buildings and he's a pretty big deal there, but he's also involved in sports naturally.
Yeah, so it's easy for them to kind of give him a call and be like, hey, do you want to donate to our school or our football program or sports athletics as a whole? But I want to flip it over to college football playoff. Ohio State, obviously they come in as the favorites for a lot of people. I thought it was kind of weird storyline people were trying to plant with Jeremiah Smith going to social media after he lost out on wide receiver of the year from USC. And they tried to say, oh, now he has a chip on his shoulder. And then a lot of people tried to plant the Julian saying only having one person interviewing him during the Heisman press conference. And then there was a large group around Mendoza and Pavia. And then, they lose in the Big Ten championship. And now they're like, oh, Ryan Day has to prove himself again. But we're talking about the defending champs. Isn't that such a crazy thought process to say that these guys have to prove themselves when they already went on one of the better runs I've seen? They were absolutely dominating teams last season and they won a national championship.
At the end of the day, you've got 8 teams left in the college football playoff, and I can guarantee you that all 8 of them are searching as we speak for any hint of disrespect that they can gin up in order to motivate themselves or whatever you want to call it. That's just the way sports works. I mean, I've seen it a million times from Nick Saban. And I mean, sometimes they'll even invent stuff, they'll make up a headline or an article and posted in the locker room, and it wasn't even real. Like, that's just the way this goes. And coaches are always looking for that edge from their players. And you can find examples of that with all of the teams who were left. And it's also funny because, like, at the end of the day, if you play for Ohio State or you play for Alabama or, any of these big blue blood programs, you've never really been disrespected in your entire life. Maybe somebody somewhere on the internet said something, right, that you grab onto. That's the way of the world right now. There's a million people commenting on college football, and there's bound to be one person who says something that you don't like. Look, at the end of the day, Ohio State is a great team. I think they probably, just knowing how hard it is to go back to back, really hard in the modern era, the way that they weren't maybe challenged by the Big Ten this year the way they would normally have been, I think probably for them to lose that game to Indiana will be good for them. I think they were probably, if I were just to psychoanalyze it, being a little bit complacent after the Michigan game. Like, they knew they were going to get a top 4 seed. Does it really matter if you're 1 or 2? I mean, it might, because I think they do have a tougher path for sure than Indiana does to the final. But, like, I just don't think they were all guns blazing going into that Big Ten championship game. And I think Indiana was. And Ohio State still almost won the game. So I look at it and think, all right, they kind of had that little, taste of defeat. That probably is good for them as they kind of chew on it for 3 weeks and get ready for the Cotton Bowl. And, I mean, they're the best team on paper, most talented team. So, unless something's gone wrong in that locker room, they should win this game, and they should probably win the whole thing, but we'll see.
Yeah, it blows you away when you talk about their opponent in the next round, Miami, because you're like, this team lost to SMU at one point in the season, Louisville. But on paper, when you say like most talented, yeah, Ohio State's probably number 1. I don't think Miami's too far behind them when you look at the roster. But then, like, you see them in this game against Texas A&M. I was so impressed by their defense, but the offense, like, outside of Mark Fletcher, he had an incredible game on the ground. But they didn't really put the ball in Carson Beck's hands. I thought that he was going to have a bigger role in this Texas A&M game, because anybody who talked about Miami, they were like, all right, they're going to live by their passing game this weekend. Now, like, if they go in with that same game plan this weekend, or not this weekend, in the upcoming game against Ohio State, it just feels like a flawed game plan, because if they Ohio State has a great rushing defense, and you got to think that Julian Sain and Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate, they're going to find a way to find the end zone a few times against Miami. So you can't really live by only scoring 1 touchdown. So, in your opinion, is this as big of a mismatch as I'm sitting here thinking?
Well, look, there's no question that Mario Cristobal is probably on the more conservative side of college coaching in 2025, but you are going to have to take some shots and some chances when you play Ohio State. I don't think there's any doubt about that. The good news in this matchup for Miami is they're a team that's really been built inside out. And, if you can give credit to Mario for one thing across the course of his tenure there, is they really focus on building, recruiting, and developing their offensive and defensive lines. And they're really, really good in both of those areas. And I think when you have that kind of team, you're built the right way to compete in a game like you're going to face against Ohio State. It doesn't mean you're going to win it, obviously. And they're going to have to be better in a lot of areas, and they're going to have to take chances, and Carson Beck is going to need to play clean, and he's not going to be able to get away with boneheaded decisions and stuff like that. But just, fundamentally, offensive and defensive line, they can match up. And so I think that probably gives them a better chance than a lot of teams in the bracket would have against Ohio State. I think it's still probably not going to be good enough, but I'm not dismissing them out of hand just because I do think they're strong in the areas you need to be strong.
Yeah. And from a recruiting stance, they've always recruited well, but it has to help that now Mario Cristobal can say, I can win the big game. I moved on in the college football playoff. But I have 2 quick questions, just knowing where we're at with time. But the first one's Alabama, because the storyline all week was DeBoer in Michigan, and then players started to have to respond to those rumors. I remember watching a Ryan Williams interview, and I think he was like, Coach has done an excellent job preparing us despite what's been happening around this program. What did you think of the Alabama game as a whole? Because they fell behind 17-0, but then they had 27 points unanswered or something like that, and then they ended up winning 34-24. What can you talk about the resiliency of this program, just facing adversity, being down in a hostile environment, and also having to deal with all those rumors and rumblings all week leading up to this game.
Alabama certainly is not a perfect team, and they have not played well every single week this year. I think one thing you do have to give them a lot of credit for is that they show up in big games typically with Kalen DeBoer. His record against top teams is incredible, both at Alabama and before that at Washington. So I think if you're Indiana, you have to be very aware of that and concerned about that. He also likes to take chances. He'll roll the dice on fourth down. And you saw in that game against Oklahoma what kind of got them going was they got in position. They were down 17-0. They drove the ball and they had 4th and 2, 4th and 3. You know, a lot of coaches would have just kicked the field goal. He went for it, got it, knowing if you don't get it, you've really deflated your team at that point. And you're probably not winning the game. But they do get it. And, you know, it's 17-7, and they're set up where Oklahoma starts making mistakes, and then, boom, they're right back in it. So I just think a lot of it goes back to the DeBoer mentality and the aggressiveness with which he coaches, combined with they certainly are a very talented team, flawed but talented. His decision-making is often the X factor. And I just think, you know, I think Indiana's going to win because I think they're better. But if Alabama does win, I'm not going to be surprised.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially after this weekend, it just seems like they were very together, well coached. But I guess my final question. So a lot of people are talking about Indiana, Ohio State. All season, I've been praising Georgia and Gunnar Stockton. I just think Gunnar Stockton's like the Tim Tebow type of quarterback, the ultimate college competitor. He's so fun to watch on the field. And the other team, Oregon, Dante Moore, because if he does everything the right way during this playoff and he performs the way that he's capable of, he could end up in the draft next year. Are those I guess the question is, are those the two teams we should be spotlighting, like as a team outside of Ohio State and Indiana that can make a run in this thing?
Look, I think all 4 of these quarterfinal matchups are really good. And you know, the thing with Georgia right now is the last month of the season, their defense has really transformed. Early in the year, that did not look like the typical Georgia defense. And I think there was a lot of concern, even internally, especially like the back end. You know, were they going to be able to defend the pass on a consistent basis against good teams? And I think you've seen them late in the year really mature, and they look a lot more defensively now, like maybe the teams you saw in, on 2022, than what they showed maybe 23 and 24, where they were good, but they were clearly had dropped off a bit. So I think with their defense playing the way they've played over the last month, like they're very, very dangerous, and I think could not easily, that's the wrong word, but they could win the national championship, where I just thought maybe in like September and October, I wasn't seeing that potential from them. Oregon has got a really interesting game here against Texas Tech. And I think people are sleeping a little bit on Texas Tech overall, just because they're not one of the fancy helmet schools. We're not used to seeing them at this level playing these kinds of games. And they came out of the Big 12, which, maybe some people don't have a lot of respect for. But the one thing about Texas Tech is their defense is very, very real. And they went out in the transfer portal and got all those guys. I watched them in person against Arizona State. Now, they lost that game. It was the only time they lost this year. But the havoc that they were able to create up front really made an impression on me. They lost that day because Sam Leavitt played out of his mind for Arizona State. And I think it takes that kind of performance, honestly, from a quarterback to get away from the pressure, to make plays, to find tight windows. Maybe Dante Moore's going to be up to the task. He's an excellent quarterback, but I'm just telling you, don't sleep on Texas Tech. They are the real deal defensively. I'm not sure about their offense, and I think they probably at some point run into a team that is just going to kind of shut them down, and they won't be able to recover. But I'm just fascinated by this matchup in the Orange Bowl. That's the game I'm going to be at on New Year's Day, and I'm excited to see how that defense looks against first of all, an offensive line like Oregon's built, and a quarterback like Dante Moore. So, to me, that's the best game of the 4, just in terms of the X's and O's of it.
Yeah, that's gonna be an exciting one. It should just be an exciting, 4 games. But That Texas Tech team, the more I hear about them, the more I'm sold on them, because I made a silly post in the beginning of the season where I said they play in the Big 12. They're not battle tested. Every fan from the Texas Tech, it felt like, came into my comments and backed them up. But the more I hear about them, I'm like, this is a legit team, especially their defense. Yeah, Dan Wolken from Yahoo Sports covers college sports. I'm reading your bio: Olympics, tennis, horse racing. It seems like you do everything. You're kind of like a switchblade knife or something. Dan, that was excellent. From the Michigan talk to the college football playoffs, I'm really thankful for you joining us today.
No problem. Happy to do it.
All right, that was Dan Wolken from Yahoo Sports. Great interview, a lot of awesome insight. But let's switch it over to the college football playoffs. That's what everybody's focusing on outside of the Michigan world. So the first game I wanted to talk about, so there's several, and they're starting, it's December 31st and January 1st are the games.
Yep.
They're going to be
Yep.
played. So the first one I wanted to talk about was the Texas Tech Oregon game, because Kevin, you could probably speak a lot on that game, but there's a lot of like mixed opinions on this game. And I think this might be the one that's most anticipated going into this not weekend, but this 2-day stretch of games, just because it's the 4 versus 5. A lot of question marks behind Texas Tech, but also, after last year, what Oregon did, where they were the heavy favorites probably going into the Ohio State game, and then Ohio State absolutely demolished them. So it's really like, what can Dan Lanning do in this big game in the playoffs? So, Kevin, what's your thoughts on your Oregon squad and how they're going to line up against Texas Tech?
I mean, I'm hoping, of course, that they obviously come out with the win, but I'm
better hope they do.
I mean, I got the shirt on and everything, but I'm hoping that I feel like they got to play fast on offense, which, I mean, they're always accustomed to doing. Get the run game going with Nottingham and all their freshman running backs too. So, I mean, as long as they get the running game going, I feel like it'll open up the passing game for Dante Moore, for Sadiq, for Corian Moore, and even if they get some of their wide receivers that have been out for the year back too, if they get the offense going, and then if they play defense how they played in the first half of last week's game, because I mean, I saw the locker room after speech of Dan Lanning kind of ripping into the defense and how they played in the second half. So if they play how they played in the first half, I think they have a solid chance of beating Texas Tech.
Yeah, I mean, so in regards to that game, the JMU Oregon game, I think I texted Kevin almost right away. I said, hey, JMU's moving the ball pretty good against Oregon. They can't score, but they're moving the ball really well against Oregon. That, to me, is a very scary proposition. And this is where I'll give kudos to Texas Tech, is that's not going to fly against a team like Texas Tech that can move just as fast as Oregon can up and down the field. The one thing I will say is that I think it was a trap game, and the definition of it, where Oregon could, come in sleepy. I don't think they did. That offense was humming pretty much all game. They, minus the interception, which wasn't Moore's fault. He looked good.
Well,
which
second interception was kind of his.
The second one was. The first one wasn't.
No.
But for the most part, the offense was humming most of the game. I think that the defense will play stouter against. Is that a word, stouter? We're in the works in the school.
I would say more stout.
More stout. They'll play more stout against Texas. But yeah, I mean, it's going to come down. I'm not concerned about Oregon's offense. It's the defense. I mean, I am concerned. Like I said, when JMU moved the ball pretty much all game against them, it didn't equate to scores. Once they had like a bend don't break mentality where they get into the red zone and then JMU couldn't score and Oregon's tightened up. That is my concern, is you got to be better than that. You can't play bend don't break against a team that throws up 42.5 points a game. You just can't. That's just not going to work. Now, the flip side of that, competition wise, has Texas Tech really played a team like Oregon at all this year? I don't think so. And I haven't hid that feeling at all. I don't think they've played a team like an Oregon that can, pretty much do what they can do and stop them as well as Texas Tech has stopped a lot of the teams they played against. I'm going to, go out I'm not going to go out on a limb. I'm going to say it. I think Oregon wins this game, but Dante Moore is going to have to play a really good football game. And it's the turnovers, obviously 2 turnovers, whether his, not his, makes no difference. They can't happen, especially from a prospect standpoint. Like, I don't know, I wasn't feeling too confident as a Jet fan after last week. It just wasn't. And two, that defense needs to play Dan Lanning football. It cannot play this, bend, don't break. It's not going to fly. Once Texas Tech gets within that 25-yard zone, they're going to score, and they're going to do it quickly. I know we're not doing picks, but Oregon obviously is going to be my pick. I do think this is going to be a high-scoring football game. I think the point totals are they're heavy. I think it's like 52.5. I could see this easily. This is going to be, I think this could be like literally a 48-45 type deal. Like, I think it could be like that for it. But I'm praying that Oregon pulls this out because I just praying they pull it out.
If it does land in that 48 to 45 range, where it's a shootout, both teams are scoring at will, I do think it falls in Oregon's favor. But to me, like, it's the argument that's been happening all season. I haven't realized how good this Texas Tech team is, and I don't think I give them enough respect on the offensive side because you look up and down on the defense. The defense has been a top 10 unit this entire season. I mean, Jacob Rodriguez, a lot of people thought he should have been in the Heisman conversation. But this linebacker unit, Ben Roberts, 74 tackles. David Bailey had 13.5 sacks this season coming off the edge. And then John Curry wasn't no slouch either. He had 67 tackles. So this might be one of the best linebacker units in the entire nation. And that front seven is just pretty scary as well. So will Dante Moore have time is the question. And I know Oregon has one of the best offensive lines in the country. So that should be a fun matchup, seeing how that offensive line does against that front seven of Texas Tech. And can they give Dante Moore some time? But on the offensive side for Texas Tech, like Mike said, 42.5 points per game. But also, check this out. Total yards per game, 480.3. That's fifth in the nation. Pass yards per game, 289.4, 11th in the
Who averages more yards than them? I just want to put that 480 yards a game. What four teams are averaging more yards than they are? I'll look it up because it's going to be like Holy Cross.
Big 12
Yeah,
football.
probably something like that. Maybe even JMU, honestly. But rush yards per game, 190.9, which was 26th in the nation. 20 plus yard plays, 90, which was second in the nation. And they don't really, they're pretty safe with the ball. 14 turnovers on the entire season. So a lot of people sleeping on this offensive unit, but they can also score with the best of them. I do think the JMU thing in the second half was kind of Oregon taking their foot off the pedal, kind of easing up.
I have the list.
All right, let's hear the list real quick.
All right, so it actually Texas Tech is 9th on my on this list, which I'm using team rank anyway. So it has Texas Tech at 9th at 462.7. Sorry, the last 3 games have been 482, but on the season 462.7 as a total for yards per game. Oregon is actually 8th, then Vanderbilt at 7, USC is 6th, Utah is 5th. Texas State is 4th, South Florida is 3rd, Mississippi is 2, and North Texas is number 1 at 507 yards a game.
I mean, that's why they're quarterback.
And over their last 3 games, by the way, North Texas averaged 553 yards a game. A season's worth of yards.
Their quarterback's fantastic. Whoever gets their quarterback in the portal is going to be very happy going into next season. He's somebody who can go from being recruited by North Texas to several years from now being looked at as a first-round pick. That's how good he is.
Wasn't he a walk-on too?
He was a walk-on.
Yes. So not even recruited, just gone.
Just for funsies in this game, because we've got 8th and 9th total yards per game. What do you think the over/under for yards is going to be in this game?
No, it'll probably be like 9, but it'll probably be
over/under yards. Like, could we see over 1,000 yards total this game?
I think Vegas is going to have it anywhere from the 58 to 62 range, if I had to guess right now.
I'm going to go out on a limb and see.
He said yards.
I'm talking about yards.
Oh,
not
yards.
I'm saying, do you think there's a chance we see over 1,000 total yards this game? I think there is.
That could be.
Especially if we get that shootout, 48-45. The points are 52.5. It's the highest spread of the week, the highest total of the week.
Yeah.
Weekend. But I realistically think we could see 1,000 yards total this game. Like, just think about that. We could see 1,000 total yards in this game.
I'm going to go against...
Jeff can barely see that in like 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. I think if anything, we see the Big 12 championship game, but roles reversed, where Oregon's gonna. What was the final score of that game? Even I don't have their
29-6,
something
like
like
Gotta
that.
be honest, didn't watch that one.
I watched
I
a
didn't
little
watch
bit
it,
of it.
but I think I saw the score.
It was a lot of turnovers on BYU's behalf. You know, we're talking about Oregon team who I don't think turns the ball over as much. I know Dante Moore threw 2 interceptions
I
against.
was about to say recently.
Yep.
34-7 was the score
Yeah,
for the
34-7. I think Texas Tech will score a little more than 7 points, but I don't see the shootout happening because I think there's a few things. Oregon's coming in like with experience from the playoff game last season. You know that was a big learning curve for Oregon last year when they faced Ohio State, and Ohio State just kind of ran them out of the stadium.
and then plus the last week too.
Yeah, yeah. Last week to me, I don't know. Like I'm falling into like fluke territory last week. Not the points that Oregon scored. I just don't. I don't feel like that's what Oregon football is. I just think it's a product of the opponent that they faced. It's the same thing with like Ole Miss giving up 300 plus passing yards to Tulane. It's like a lot of like garbage time points that happened in that JMU game. Dan Lanning's too good of a coach to let that carry into this week against
Oh, yeah.
Texas Tech.
Yeah, my only concern was just how much they listen. They JMU in the first half didn't score much, but they did move the ball between the 20s
They did.
as pretty much. And now some of it was trick plays and stuff like that, but they were pretty much. And how many fourth downs did they convert? Like that is scary, especially moving in. Like I can imagine. I'm not an Oregon fan, but I can imagine that's a scary thing because they're a very much. They're a Sun Belt team, and they moved the ball against Big Bad Oregon at will between the 20s. Again, bend don't break. They got into the red zone. They couldn't do anything. A team like Texas Tech is very much going to be able to do something when you get to the red zone. I'd have to look up their red zone stats, but I'd be willing to bet you they're one of the better teams in the country, if not top 20. I'll look it up right now.
But you're also you're talking about like what did they face this season? I don't know if there's outside of what like Utah's been. I don't even think like BYU's defense was like were they in the top 20 even this season? Like
I don't know. No, probably not. Like I said, it's gonna be a bigger test for Texas Tech than it is Oregon. Oregon, they've played regardless of what people say. Oh, they only beat one ranked team. They lost. They played better competition overall than Texas Tech has played all year.
Yeah.
They're also a battle tested team. They've been here before. Texas Tech. I couldn't tell you the last time Texas Tech was in a BCS bowl. Like, and that's way back when. Probably with Michael Crabtree.
And Harold.
Yeah, exactly. Like this is new territory for them. But they're going to be facing a very stout. This is going to be the toughest. Every game they play from here on out, if they find a way to get past Oregon, is going to be the hardest game they've played in a long, long, long time. And people are like, "Oh, well, I remember when such and such beat such and." This is 2025, soon to be 2026. Different time. Like I don't anticipate Oregon losing this game. I think Dan Lanning is, all of us on here think he's one of the best coaches in college football. We all think he's a future national champion coach. Like I think he gets them prepped and ready. But as an Oregon fan, like I said, it's never good when a little team moves the ball up and down the field. And also, just to be fair, that also shows how well coach JMU was.
Yep.
So, I mean, just to give them some credit instead of, I feel like we're beating them up.
Yeah,
they're a well-coached team.
Bob Chesney is a great coach. I have two pros I have one pro, one con for Oregon going into this game. My pro is Dante Moore has all his weapons back. I'm hearing even Evan Stewart might play in this game. How many he will actually receive, is the question because he's probably going to be 4th or 5th on the depth chart going into this game. Yeah. They have literally everyone. So no excuses for Dante Moore. And he knows what's at, the cost of this game, like a poor game against Texas Tech could be. It could be a draft, whether he enters the draft or not.
It be a make or break.
Yeah,
this could be very much a make or break.
Make or break for sure. The con for me though is, and it was probably not a con in the first game. It's more of a con in the second game. Oregon's losing both of their coordinators. Their defensive coordinator to California, the University of California, and they're losing their offensive coordinators to Kentucky. I hate to say this because I believe they're professionals. And I really like Stein going to Kentucky. I think he's going to be fantastic in the SEC. Whether Kentucky's going to back him up with the NIL and all that is another discussion. But you like to believe that they're professionals, but at the end of the day, they have a program that they're in charge of now. The portal's about to open up on January 2nd. I have my concerns that their full focus isn't on this playoff game. Yes, they worked their way to this point, but look what happened with Tulane. Look what happened to James Madison. And yeah, Bob Chesney was able to hold JMU together, but I don't know. I just feel like it's very hard to, recruit, start, focusing on next year's roster and also keep your focus on these games. And you're going to see that with Ohio State too, because is Hartline even coaching as an offensive coordinator? I heard Ryan Day is actually taking over as the play caller for offensive coordinator, so I don't think he is. But it's fun times in college football now because teams are starting to dip into the coordinators, and that's kind of like the NFL in the past, 10 years. You see a lot of coordinators step up and get head coaching positions. We've seen the same coaches go from team to team every year before the NIL era. Now it's starting to become a young man's game where coordinators are starting to get the call. And that's why I was so big on Georgia's defensive coordinator to take the Michigan job at first. At the end of the day, not to go back to that, Whittingham probably is the right hire because of the veteran presence that they needed. For these two guys specifically, nothing like we talk about Dante Moore, make or break for him. This is not a make or break situation for these coordinators. They already have their positions. They're already established into a team. They're ready to turn the page to the next chapter. I just question what the focus is going to be for those two.
To rebuttal that a little bit.
Rebuttal.
Yeah. Exactly. I would say, they're still learning that from Lanning too, because Lanning coached the whole way through when Georgia was winning the national title, 2021, 2022, when he was hired as Oregon's coach. He's obviously, I would say he's probably still giving pointers on their how they can handle that situation as well.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And, I think they're still present in the practices and everything. It's just all the outside game, film watching and everything else that goes into a winning program that, could also bleed into them recruiting as well. So how they're balancing their time, we'll never know.
Yeah, and I'm sure they have other staff members that are going to be going after the talent that they want.
Yeah, it's heavy on the coordinators for sure.
Exactly.
Whenever you see a top recruit, it's never the head coach that they're linked to. It's always the coordinators. So, so we'll see. I think it's going to be, this is the 4 versus 5. So I figured we'd talk about this first. Why don't we do something a little different this week? Why don't we actually give our predictions before we move on? You guys cool with that?
Yeah, I'm good. I'll go first. Oregon in a game, 48-45, like I said, 1,000 yards of offense total between the two teams. Somehow they pull it out, and I spend the full 3 hours insulting Kevin via text.
Probably. I'm saying it'll probably be a high-scoring game just because, the defense did look a little shoddy against JMU. So, I'm hoping Dan kind of gets a fire under their ass and doesn't get it so that it's such a high-scoring game. But I'm thinking Oregon wins by either a field goal or touchdown.
I think you're going to fall into something similar to the USC game. The nice thing about this Oregon team is they're playing their best football at the right time of the year right now. That wasn't the case last season. Even the Big Ten championship game, they probably should have beat Penn State by 2 touchdowns, in my opinion, last season, but they let Penn State hang around. So the question is, were they fully prepared for that Ohio State game? Did they kind of go in on their high horse because they beat Ohio State earlier in the season and they were fresh off a Big Ten championship game? Now they kind of have a chip on their shoulder. A lot of people are questioning, can Oregon hang around with the big boys? Can they move on, advance? Some people are even saying, they might lose to Texas Tech. People are jumping on that Texas Tech bandwagon. So
I want to see the geography of those people. How many of them are from Texas?
Yeah, is it the Big 12 analysts? But I think this could be a 38-24 game in Oregon's favor. I'm very high on Oregon right now. And not just because we have someone on here that's wearing an Oregon shirt at the moment, but because I do believe out of the teams outside of, the traditional, or not traditional because Indiana hasn't been in this position either, but outside of that Ohio State, Indiana team, I think your third Big Ten team could be the ones that could possibly make a run and take down one of those two teams. Georgia probably being my other school I really like, but yeah, I think Oregon's going to be pretty comfortable in this game. But how about Dan Lanning's comments about he thinks Texas Tech should be playing at their home field for this game? I thought that was pretty interesting. He has a pretty good point. Leading up to the championship game, don't you think the higher seed should have the home field advantage?
I mean, I agree, but I mean, I know that
that's not the way it broke down.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying they have all these bowl games that, like, bowl territories that need to get filled and shit. So
yeah, I'm sure. Like I think this one is this the one that's at the Orange Bowl, right?
Yeah, it's the Orange Bowl.
Yeah, they're still trying to, obviously it's still the original BCS Bowl, right? Like they're still trying to accommodate those bowl games so that they didn't take the losses. Which I got to be honest with you, I was thinking this week, not to change the subject, but I've been thinking about the BCS Bowl era. Kind of miss it. I kind of miss it. Like the bowl games meant so much more. I know that we used to get so angry about deciding the national championship game, but like, I'll be honest with you, the sitting on the edge of your seat wondering, oh, what bowl game are we going to get? What BCS bowl are we going to? Are we just going to miss a BCS bowl? Like, I kind of miss it. I'm not going to lie.
Think about how fun today would have been if we were still in the original bowl era. There would have been some fantastic matchups today.
100%. It would have been, but also to be fair, I don't remember specifically, but I guarantee you I was one of the people bitching about, hey, this doesn't make sense how we're putting these teams together. And to be fair, we're still doing it because, JMU and Tulane, made tons of sense, but I still don't feel bad for Notre Dame.
No. Yeah, I've moved on from the Notre Dame stuff. We have some awesome matchups happening.
You moved on from the Notre Dame stuff because you want their head coach.
But not as his Michigan Wolverines. He wants them on his
New York Giants. Yeah. Apparently the Titans are going to give him a run too, so we'll see how that turns out. But hey, both of them have what they believe is a franchise quarterback, so it should be a fun coaching search. But
we'll talk about that later. Once we get
we'll talk about that after the playoffs.
Definitely.
Championship. By the way, before we continue, I just want to make it Derrick Henry's playing like he's 21 again.
Yeah,
just to be clear. 21 carries in the first half.
3 touchdowns.
Do that with the quarterback situation.
Ty Huntley. Oh my Lord, the veneers on that man. I thought he was wearing a mouthpiece.
Isn't this quarterback game Malik Willis against Ty Huntley?
Yeah, I feel bad for Malik Willis. His offensive line is not like he took a snap off the face mask. He was calling his audibles. He lost the ball in the air. Like I feel bad for him. But anyway, that's a conversation for another time. But I just want to put that back out there that Derrick Henry is playing like he's 21. I am impressed.
Yeah, good. 3 touchdowns too.
LSU winning right now.
And it's only the first half. Like I don't know. And I don't know. This what is he, 32 years old now? He's got to be up there, right? 32, 31.
How old is
I think he looked it up. I want to say he looked it up like last week when we're on.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's impressive to say the least. And that Alabama football, baby, roll Tide.
Actually, I wanted to, Alabama. We could talk about that game. I wanted to talk about Miami versus Ohio State next because I thought that was a really solid matchup. But this Alabama-Indiana game is also a really good one. Actually, like if Indiana doesn't give their best shot, you could be looking at Ohio State versus Oregon last year in the college football playoffs, where this Alabama team could be getting hot at the perfect time. It comes in and gives Indiana a bit of a wake-up call. But I'll let you guys go first on this game. What are your thoughts?
So with the I'm pretty big on Indiana. I'm not going to, I think I've kind of made it obvious over our series of episodes that I am a very much pro Indiana fan here. However, I think this is a really good test. Alabama's defense is a good defense. Very good defense. My concern with Alabama in this game is can they move the ball against Indiana? And, they do have a very stout defensive line that's going to put pressure on Ty Simpson. We saw against the first Oklahoma matchup, he didn't respond well to pressure at all. Is that going to be an issue this game? I don't know. Obviously, they won their playoff game, so a lot of people that said Alabama doesn't belong probably got put to bed, silenced quite a bit. They played well in that game to lock it up. Yeah, my X factor in this game is going to be the quarterbacks, Ty Simpson versus Mendoza. I just think Mendoza's a head over heels better player than Ty Simpson is, and I do have concerns about him facing pressure from this front. I can see a path to where Alabama gets the upset here. I don't think it's realistic. I don't. I've thought about this game quite a bit throughout the week. I just don't see, they're going to need really good ball from from that offense. And I don't know, something about pressure and Simpson just doesn't mix for me. So that's what I'm going to keep coming back to. I'm going to say Indiana pulls this one off. And I'm going to be honest with you. I know the spread on this game it looks like it's 6.5. I could see this being a 2-score loss for Alabama. I just think Mendoza's on one of those weird, like, destiny missions where, it's just, it's going to take a lot to beat him. And I just don't think that Alabama has the ammunition to get it done. Yeah, X factors, Ty Simpson, Fernando Mendoza, the matchup. Mendoza's a head over heels better player. And I think he shows that in this game.
Yeah, I think it could be. It depends on how Ty Simpson comes out. If Ty Simpson plays the way he did, I would want to say in the second half, he played head over heels better than Mateer and everybody. I want to say he started doing better after that interception, and the momentum swung for Alabama. So I would say it's going to be, if they can weather the storm, they can keep up with Indiana. But Indiana's defense is also very good. Saw it against Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. I do think it'll be a close game. I know Freck's saying it could be a 2-touchdown game. I would say if Alabama's down late, I think it could be a 2-touchdown game if Ty Simpson's making a bad call on it and throws a bad interception. So
Yeah, it's the story of what Alabama team's going to show up. If you get the Alabama team from the second half, then they can very well beat Indiana or any team in this bracket. But also, if you get the Alabama team that beat 4 or 5 top 25 schools in a stretch in SEC play, then that's a very scary team to face. And if you get Ty Simpson, who from last week, who was smiling on the sidelines, pumping his team up, even when they were down by 17 points. And it just never seemed like he was fazed by the situation of being on the road and losing to a SEC school that had a top 10 defense in the country. And all season long, they were the more physical and fast team. He just, like, even sitting there and watching Ty Simpson, you never felt like that game was over. And that was a different Ty Simpson than what you saw in the Georgia game, because in that Georgia game, I was worried for him. I was sitting there and I was like, there's no way he enters the NFL draft. And will he even be the same quarterback going into next season? I could see this being like the downfall of Ty Simpson, where, they have a very good freshman quarterback behind him that a lot of people are excited about. And if he continued to play like that, maybe the whispers start to get louder and Ty Simpson eventually finds his way on the bench, and then he's hitting the transfer portal, and we know how that whole outcome goes. They never become the same quarterback in the NFL. But he totally turned around the script. It's just a matter of like what this offensive play calling is going to be for Alabama, because I don't like that in these big games, DeBoer and co. don't get like Ryan Williams and Bernard into the mix. And I know that freshman was, Brooks was so impressive last week, but is it realistic that he's going to be impressive for 2 weeks in a row where, that was his breakout game, that was his best game of the season? But to me, you have to rely on the veteran guys like Horton, like Bernard, like Ryan Williams, maybe even the tight end, Cuevas. He's been a consistent target for them all season. What worries me is I thought the X factor, Mike, because you bring up Fernando Mendoza versus Ty Simpson, which that's going to be the headline right there, is the two quarterbacks, because Mendoza is the clear number one guy for quarterbacks going into this draft. And, there's still talk about Simpson possibly entertaining this NFL draft if he has a good playoff run. But to me, like, what the Indiana defense did against Ohio State was so impressive in that Big Ten championship game. That, to me, could be the X factor, because they completely took away Bo Jackson from that Ohio State offense. They made Julian Sayin look uncomfortable at times, and we haven't seen that all season, because he's just been so poised and calm in almost every situation. And ultimately, they were able to outperform a Ohio State defense, which all season long I've been given praise, and I believe this is one of the best defenses I've seen in a very long time. And Indiana's, on that day, Indiana's smaller unit was the better unit. But didn't they just lose one of their top performers when he was celebrating? I forget his name.
Yeah, it was the linebacker. Yeah, I can't think of his name offhand, but yes, they did. Was it torn? He tore something, didn't he? Like a ACL.
I want to say
from celebrating with the fans.
Yeah, that's a big loss right there.
Not great.
Yeah, not great to lose that. I don't think it's going to impact how Indiana plays in this game, but regardless, at some point it might hurt them in this playoff. But like looking at like what the quarterfinal is, any chance of a upset, I think this is the game to me because I don't really see Ole Miss hanging around with Georgia. I really don't see Miami hanging around with Ohio State, and I've already given my prediction for Oregon versus Texas Tech. I think if you're going to see an upset this and college football, that's the great thing about it is that there's always a surprise and ready for college football. But I think this is the one that you could see it. Now, I don't know if I'm ballsy enough to pick that, but Alabama is really going to have to use everybody. And I really think that running back by committee, Daniel Hill, Jam Miller, that they're going to have to get going in this game because if Indiana takes away the run game completely again, like they did against Ohio State, now it's the Ty Simpson trying to come from behind for a second straight week. I think that can be trouble for Alabama, in my opinion, because teams just don't get lucky 2 weeks in a row.
No,
you can't let Indiana get out in front by several touchdowns in this game.
No, I think that's a good segue into our, finalize our picks there. Steve, you want me to go first, or you want to, Kevin? You know what? Let's let Kevin go first. He always goes last or second. You lead it off, tough guy.
I'm gonna say it's a close game. I just think with how Indiana played against Ohio State that I'm gonna give Cignetti the nod here of probably by like a 3 to 7 point Vic spread, unless Ty Simpson is making a bad call late in the game.
Right. Yeah. So I think a lot of it to me is going to come down to, is like Steve said, what Alabama team shows up. Are we getting this Alabama team we've seen over the last, I guess month and a half, 2 months, where, they're hit or miss? Ty Simpson's shaky. I unfortunately don't think you could turn things around that quickly. You definitely can get like a throwback performance for sure, but I'm going to say that's probably not the case here. I think Indiana's defense is, I've said it, we've talked about it. I mean, they're the real deal. Their front seven is fearsome. And they've got some ball hawks too. So I think it's gonna be a rough day at the office for Ty Simpson. And it has, I like Ty Simpson. I think it's gonna be a rough day at the office for him. I think unfortunately something changed, and it hasn't fully clicked back. We've seen some, old Ty Simpson come back, like you see spurts of it, but something clicked and it's just not, it hasn't been fluid, so to speak. I think Indiana probably wins this in a 2-score game. Mendoza continues on his run. It's like a, kind of like a destiny thing. So yeah, I don't see Alabama definitely could upset them. I'll never underestimate that, but I just, something just feels different to me about this Indiana team.
Yeah, it does. It feels like this Indiana team should win this game, and they should have a pretty good shot at being in that national championship game as well. And we'll talk more about that after this week. But I am very aware of the Heisman blues that can happen. We've seen it in bowl games in the past where somebody wins the Heisman Trophy and then that bowl game that they don't step up the way they've been doing so the entire season. But I also think Fernando Mendoza is a bit different. Maybe not talent-wise than some other Heisman Trophy winners in the past, but the way he's just built, his personality, his leadership he's provided this entire season. Going into the Big Ten championship game, I was sitting there and there was a lot of times throughout that game I was like, does Mendoza have it in him to drive this team up the field? Because like we've seen it, but we've seen it against like Penn State, and Oregon was their big win this year, and that's a massive win. But outside of that Oregon win, it was like Indiana's schedule wasn't that great either. But we haven't seen it against a team like Ohio State, is what I was thinking the entire time. And I was doubting Mendoza throughout that game, and he just answered the calling every single time whenever I had those doubts. And, some of the throws in tight windows he was making, really impressive. I think the touchdown throw even that he had, it was, a spot on pass that he needed to make. I think because of that, I think Mendoza is going to come into this Rose Bowl and he's, going to be him and Cignetti are both going to have roses in their mouths after this game, but I don't think it's going to be that 2-touchdown game. I think it's going to be something more like 27-21 where, Indiana might have to hold off Ty Simpson at the end of the game, and it's going to be a close one. This is going to be a fun one. Like I said, this is what I felt like could have been like the upset of the week if I had to pick an upset. So I think, outside of like Texas Tech and Oregon having all the question marks and being 4 versus 5, I think the Rose Bowl is the game, me as a college football fan, the one I'm looking forward to the most this week. But yeah, let's move on to Ohio State, Miami. Two talented rosters. I think a lot of people have Ohio State as their favorites, despite what happened in the Big Ten championship games. Where are you guys at with this game?
Well, actually, you know what?
I didn't get to watch most of the A&M game. I forget what I was doing, but I know Freck was texting me through most of it. Just Cristobal as a coach, I don't feel is the greatest coach. He makes a lot of boneheaded coaching moves. I mean, even going back to I think it was last year or 2 years ago, when instead of kneeling the ball, he had a running back. He handed the ball to the running back and fumbled it, and they returned it for a touch, or something happened. But I do think that it's going to come down to who's the better coach in this one, and Ryan Day is going to outcoach Cristobal. I think this one has probably one of the bigger blowout chances.
Yeah, I mean, the spread says that 9.5 points. Me and Steve, I think we're kind of similar in our thought process originally, and Miami is the most talented roster in the playoff in terms of just pure player talent.
Yeah, I agree with Cruz.
After last week, though, in the A&M game, I spent the whole game complaining about the play calling. And it's not run versus pass. It's just like situational football and just the, there was like 3 or 4 end arounds they tried to run. Like, it just didn't make sense. Listen, you got a guy who's won a national title, who's been to the playoff, maybe put a little trust in him. I understand that in some of their losses, he's turned the ball over quite a bit, but like this is the situation where you bring a guy like him in and expect him to flourish. And they didn't even give the opportunity for that. That game should have been a lot worse than it was. I mean, it should have been a blowout against A&M. Like, Miami should have floored that game. The defense finally, well, not finally, they're a really good defense, but, Bain showed up with 3 sacks finally. He converted some pressures, even though on the last drive he went cold, but so did the rest of the defense until that interception to end the game. But yeah, I got to be honest, I don't see how this defense could slow down Ohio State. And not to mention, this Ohio State team, I have to imagine, is going to be really motivated. Like, they're going to be playing pissed off, I think. So, yeah, I don't see, after what I saw last week, I think Kevin's right. I just don't think Cristobal's the guy that's going to go out and out coach somebody like a Ryan Day, or even be able to handle this kind of offense that he's going to face this week. I'm just going to say the blowout probably does happen here. If you told me, Miami hangs, for 2 or 3 quarters, I'd probably believe you. But, I just don't know. I hated the play calling. Play calling they used against A&M just made no sense to me. And if they pull that out again this week, they're going to get devoured. And I anticipate they will anyway. So, I think this is probably the blowout of the week.
Yeah, this isn't going to be a game where you're going to see the touchdown in the final few minutes again. This is a different offense you're facing, and Miami's offense is going to have to show us something in order to hang around with Ohio State. I don't know if they have it in them to do that, but before I get into that, I do want to talk about how great that defense was against Texas A&M. Mohamed Toure had 8 tackles, which was a really solid game, but
Are you Rutgers own? 4 years.
Yeah, exactly. And he stepped
going to be
up.
back though?
So you got
I don't know if he's going to be back though with the concussion.
he might be out this
I
game.
saw that
the concussion. I mean, he was flatlined on the field.
Yeah. Maybe they're without him then. But the rush of Mesidor and Bain. Mesidor had 1.5 sacks. Bain had 3.5 or 3, I believe, 3 sacks. And then Bryce Fitzgerald. He has 6 interceptions this season. Had 2 big picks against Texas.
As a true freshman,
yeah. Including the game-winning pick against Marcel Reed, who threw it like right at him in the back of the end zone. But going into this game, like when I was thinking about previews for this game, or the preview for the A&M Miami game, I was saying like this is Carson Beck's chance, because Mike, you kept talking about like Beck could really improve his stock from this playoff and during the combine and during his pro day. Like he could be that quarterback, could be like Jackson Dart. And I was sitting there kind of believing that also. But after this game, I could still see him rising, because I don't think Miami utilizes him in the proper way. 20 passes against Texas A&M, and it didn't feel like they gave him the play calling that could really like go.
It's almost like they just don't understand how to use. Well, it's not even that they don't understand how to use him. It's just the situational football. Like it just doesn't add up to me. I think he's being misused. I think he's capable of more. I'm not saying he's a guy you want to drop back 40 times a game, but in the biggest game of the season and you're just trying to play like you can't lose. I don't know. I feel very less confident about that this week than I did last week because I really did think he could be a riser in the playoff. And yeah, they won, but I don't know. I don't think anybody watched that game and was like, yeah, Carson Beck. That's not the same guy that played at Georgia. It doesn't even look like the same guy.
Well, also, in their 2 losses, they had 2 losses this season.
Yeah.
SMU, Louisville. He threw 6 interceptions. That concerns me because a lot of the burden's on him in those games, and one of them, I think he threw 4 interceptions. But this game, he completed 14 of 20 passes, but he wasn't looking at 20-plus yard routes. He was very conservative with his decision making, going underneath, making the safe pass. And I don't know if it was because of like where we were at the game, where it was 3-3 the entire time, and he was sitting there saying like, I don't want to make the mistake that's going to cost my team. In order to beat Ohio State, you have to take your chances. Mendoza took his chances in the Big Ten championship game. That's why he won that game. You're not going to beat Ohio State by being conservative because this is a team that can outpunch anyone. If you want to have a game where it's score for score, Ohio State can win that game. If you want to have a defensive game like Texas A&M versus Miami, Ohio State's going to win that every single time too. This is a juggernaut that I feel like was already looking past the Big Ten championship game when they faced Indiana. I don't even know if Indiana can beat them twice in a season, but I do. It surprises me every time I post a video, even like fan bases come after me for opinions. So after the Miami Texas Tech game or Texas A&M game, I said Mark Fletcher should have been used more this season. You have a guy who's 6'2", 225 pounds. In that entire game, like he broke free in a hole and people were tackling him from behind. Like it takes more than one guy to bring down Mark Fletcher. So he can really tire out a defense. I think he's just, the amount of 10 plus yard carries he had in this game and like open field that he found, to me that he had a really solid game, maybe his best game of the season. But people are coming into the comments saying, oh, Pringle's the more elusive back, they should give him more carries, blah blah blah. And these were Miami fans. I'm like, why can't you just be happy if a guy who had a awesome game, who was probably the reason that you won this game, that carried your entire offense against Texas A&M? And I think he should be your key to victory against Ohio State, because I'm with you, Meg. I don't think Carson Beck's going to be the guy who does it. I really like going into the Texas A&M game. I was like, all right, maybe Carson Beck does what Ty Simpson did against Oklahoma, where he steps up and he really rallies the troops and he becomes that guy. I'm not feeling that same way against Ohio State. I really think if they're going to win this game, they're going to have to get creative with the play calling. They're going to have to get Malachi Tony his touches somehow because he's just explosive. But they're also going to have to use Mark Fletcher. He's going to have 20-plus carries in this game. And even if that happens and all goes right, I don't even know if that's enough to beat this Ohio State team.
Yeah, I don't know. I just keep thinking of like Miami's defense is, they're one of the top defenses. I think they've allowed the 6th fewest points this year, or they're the 6th fewest average points per year against them. I just think it's different when you got Jeremiah Smith, Julian Sayin, Carnell Tate staring at you, Bo Jackson staring across the field at you. I don't know how they slow them down. I understand that Bain's for a lot of people a top 5 prospect, and by some people think he's a can't miss prospect. Like he's that good. I just don't see what he can do. I don't know. Ohio State's offensive line's no joke. I think they're probably going to get eaten up in this game. I got to be honest. I'm struggling to find a path to victory, just like with Alabama. Only this one I think is worse. I can make excuses or find ways to tell myself that Alabama could pull it off against Indiana. This game is a mismatch across the board, and I don't know how. And like I said, Cristobal's just I don't want to say he's not a good coach, and I'm trying to avoid saying that, but his play calling is so bad. It's so bad. Like if I was a Miami fan, I don't know if I'd be able to truthfully, and as a Rutgers supporter previously this year, I guess, I'd rather watch them than watch the offense that Cristobal runs. Like I don't get it. It doesn't have any rhyme or reason, and the game scripts are weird, and I think it's going to be more of that against Ohio State, and Ohio State's going to make it look like child's play out there.
Coming from an Oregon fan, Cristobal's decision making was always questionable.
It's horrendous. That's why you don't hire offensive linemen to be head coaches.
Yeah. I mean, Miami definitely can recruit with the best of them, and Cristobal is a big reason for that. But also the play calling matters, and we see that, that's why Ohio State's so successful compared to other schools, is because they out recruit you, but they also put it together on the playing field too. So year in and year out, there's like these big talented rosters, like LSU in this season. It was like, how are they not in the college football playoff with like the talent that was on that roster? Injuries, Nussmeier's play, stuff like that factor in. But if all was going right, you would think that a lot of those guys would probably be on the field week in and week out. So big part of it is coaching, being able to get the most out of your roster. It goes deeper than the recruits on the field and how talented your roster is, because we could say Miami's roster is as talented as any roster in this college football playoff. But because of Mario Cristobal, you start to question, can they do it? Can they take down a juggernaut like Ohio State? So let's get predictions in here. Who wants to start it all?
I'll go first this one. Yeah, I like I said, I think that this defense is going to struggle to slow down Ohio State's offense. So Miami's defense is going to struggle to slow them down. And that's right there is going to be spelling disaster. Plus Ohio State's defense, I think, is probably going to have a field day against Beck, especially when the play calling doesn't make sense. It's a lot of runs. They'll stack the box. Beck will drop back, and it'll be confusing to begin with. I think Ohio State probably, I'm almost willing to guarantee this is the blowout of the weekend. Like, this is going to be bad. Unless they can have one of those, Carson Beck turns into Georgia Carson Beck, and the play calling is like Kirby Smart. I don't see how. I think Chris Paul gets outcoached. And honestly, I think he gets outcoached so bad where you probably have to question, is he the guy? Because this team's too talented to look like they have. So, I'm going to say Ohio State in a blowout. I don't know how many scores, but it's going to be multiple scores. I think it'll be 3 scores maybe. Like a 17-point deficit that Miami face, ends up losing to. But yeah, I don't know. Cristobal just, like I said, leaves a lot to be desired, and then some.
Yeah, I could see this being the same thing that Ohio State did in the second round last year, of how they killed Oregon. So I'm definitely going to go Ohio State on this one.
I'm the same. I see like a 35-10 thumping in this game.
Yeah.
I think
I was trying to be nice.
It's leaning towards that. Miami actually reminds me a lot of like the Illinois game, where we were like, oh, good quarterback. Will they be able to hang around? First true test since Texas, and then they just come in and just get smacked around. And it's feeling like this is going to happen in this game, where I would think that, Jeremiah Smith and Cardinal Tate both get touchdowns in this game. Julian Sayin will probably throw like 3 touchdown passes. I'm sure Bo Jackson will get his touches. It's all going to be a tune-up for that next round. But this is not the game we're going to be talking about where we're going to be like, is Ohio State getting a true test this week? It's not happening. Let's move on. This is another one, in my opinion, that could get a little ugly, especially if Ole Miss is missing their running back. What is it, Kewan Lacey, right? That's their running back's name?
Yes.
I know he got injured towards the end of that Ole Miss game against Tulane. So we'll see the health of Ole Miss, but they're facing Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. What's your guys' thoughts on this game?
I think, I know they played in the beginning of the year and Georgia won 43-35. So, and that was with Lane Kiffin. So I think if Georgia plays how they did in the SEC championship game, I think it could be kind of exactly the same of how they beat Alabama and just strangle them on defense, because their defense was very good against Ty Simpson in Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like they played pretty motivated, Ole Miss. I was surprised with how motivated they played. It seems like they want to win in spite of, and I think that's a good chip to carry. I'm not as down as others might necessarily be or could be in this game. Yeah, it's a heavy test, very tall task. Georgia's no joke, and for many, I think they're probably what a lot of people's pick to win the national title this year. I don't know. It's hard for me to sway myself against Georgia because of the powerhouse that they are, but I don't know. The Ole Miss, they showed some fight last week. They did. Like, I think they want to win. And like I said, I think they want to win in spite of, obviously, the whole Lane Kiffin ordeal. And they kind of answered my questions in terms of would they be motivated or not. And I feel like they're very motivated. Granted, it was against a Tulane team, but they still showed up. They still had to play, and they did. Yeah, I don't know. I think Georgia probably wins this one. The spread's 6.5. Over-under is 55.5. Actually, it is the biggest over-under of the week, which I thought it was the Texas Tech Oregon game. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. I'm still going to pick Georgia in this game to cover that pretty easily, I think. But, well, maybe not pretty easily. I think they cover it. Gunnar Stockton looks, he's just not making mistakes. He's playing very much mistake-free football. I'm doing exactly what Georgia needs. That Georgia defense, top notch. I'm looking here. In terms of points allowed, they're 11th. Yards allowed, they're actually Ole Miss is yards allowed per game, they're 13th. They're only allowing 285 yards a game. Yeah, Georgia wins this to me, but I think Ole Miss will show respectably and give some people a lot of something to look forward to next year. That's what I think.
Yeah, the motivation piece was big, especially after losing their head coach. So I think there's a lot to prove. Oregon, I talked about the chip on their shoulder. I think Ole Miss has an even bigger chip on their shoulder because it was like, are we here because of our head coach or are we here because of the talent on this team? Trinidad Chambliss is the real deal, in my opinion. He's only thrown 3 interceptions this year. He's thrown for over 3,200 passing yards, just making smart decisions, has shown that he belongs because he came from a D2 school. And he just, like, right from the start, when Austin Simmons went down, he just eased into the position and hasn't looked back. But Kejuan Lacey, in my opinion, he's the key to this game, his health. If Ole Miss has Kejuan Lacey, then, they should be able to hang around. They should be able to control some time of possession, and they should be able to find the end zone. Without Lacey, I don't think this is a contest. Kirby Smart, it's just, I talk about this week in and week out. It's just truly unbelievable what he's been able to do with this Georgia football team. And Georgia football is always going to get the 4-star, 5-star recruits, but this Georgia football team this season does not line up to what we've seen in the past roster wise. And we talk about talent in that Miami Ohio State game. I think if you looked across the board, talent for talent, Georgia doesn't line up with some of these teams, or it doesn't have those big names that we consistently talk about that are going to get the first round nods. But he still has found a way to win, and a large part of that is what Gunnar Stockton has transformed into as a quarterback. He is the college quarterback, and we've talked about this countless times on this podcast. But also, like, what they did against Alabama in that SEC championship game. Alabama looked lost out there. It was a no contest from the start. Georgia was the superior team on that day. And if they continue to do that, then, the sky's the limit for this squad. They can hang around with anybody. And I credit that to Kirby Smart again, because year in and year out, when Kirby Smart makes it to the SEC championship game, when he makes it to the playoff or a meaningful football game, he has proven himself as a head coach. So the fact that they have Kirby Smart on their sideline, and Ole Miss had a guy who technically has the interim tag, but he became the full-time coach. But, it was his first time as a head coach in the playoff game. That's a lot to overcome, in my opinion. I don't think it's going to be as high scoring as the first time they met, but I'm leaning heavily towards Georgia in this game. So do we want to do some predictions?
Yeah, I think Georgia will. I think it'll be. I don't like Steve said. I don't think it'll be as high scoring as it was in the first game, but I do see it as being probably like a 31, maybe 24, 21 game, and Georgia favored.
Yeah, I like I said, I like how Ole Miss showed last week. I just don't think that they have enough to beat this team. And like I said, I think Georgia probably is one of my national title picks in terms of one of the teams I expect to see there. I think that they show well in defeat, if that means anything. Give us something to look forward to next year. It's probably like I think they'll show out well, maybe a 1-score loss. But Gunnar Stockton, like I said, is I speak about it. He is, if you're going to design a college quarterback to get it done, he's the guy. I don't care if he's a game manager. Sometimes that's all you need, and that's all Georgia needs is a game manager, guy that's not going to make mistakes, and he doesn't do that. He's steady. He keeps moving forward, and that's all they need, and that's all he does, and that's enough. So Georgia, I think in a one-score game, like I said, I feel like Ole Miss is motivated. They'll show well in defeat, give us something to look forward to next year. Chambliss is no joke. Whether he stays or goes, I think he seems like he might be staying at Ole Miss. Maybe. I know a lot of people said jump and ship to LSU with Kiffin. Doesn't seem like anybody wants to go with Kiffin from Ole Miss so far. But I think it's it's going to be a good football game to watch. Georgia wins.
If he does get granted that 6th year.
I thought he had another year. I thought he did get it. Did I miss that?
Was it granted already? I thought that was...
I thought the lawsuit was put to bed.
Maybe. I thought we were still...
I'm looking it up. I'll here. You do.
Just a quick funny coincidence. As soon as we started doing this, Lane Kiffin popped up on the screen during the LSU Houston game. So just a funny.
He was there. Did you see?
Yeah, he's there, and he's in the announcer's booth. They're talking to him right now.
Did you see he stole he went to the grocery store and he didn't have any bags, so he just took the cart, not the cart, the basket home with them.
Somebody, the other announcer that was there gave him grocery bags.
Oh, that's hilarious. That is fantastic.
He was not granted the 6th year yet. They're still fighting it, but I assume it has to be coming to bed soon. This can't carry on that far.
I think they should give it to him. He's only had 1 year with Division I football, right? He was D2 the rest of the time. So
yeah, I think that is their argument, is that he hasn't played Division I football. So, but I mean, you really can't negate the previous 5 years, I guess. Like, I don't know. I'd give it to him just because there's other guys. You got guys. What was it? Tight end at Miami, played like 9 years and transferred to some, like, come on, just whatever. Like, put it to bed. Let's just do it, I guess. Yeah. But their argument seems to be that he hasn't played Division I. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, the NCAA is not that generous either with granting more time, especially now that we're past the COVID times. 23 years old, will be 24 in August, so he's already younger than Pavia at this point. So why not do it? Just give him another year, another chance to prove himself. I mean, how old was Tyler Shugg when he made the NFL? 25 years old. So.
25 years old when he got drafted.
Yeah.
What was he? He was 6 years too, though, wasn't he? He had the COVID year, so I think it was 6 years for him.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And in all fairness, he might be the quarterback for the Saints. I don't know. He don't look bad. He don't look good. He don't look bad.
I certainly wouldn't want him as my franchise quarterback, but
hell, it's like a game manager.
Unfortunately, they're out of a position. They're not in a position where they can take a quarterback unless, I don't know.
Yeah.
Somehow more quarterbacks find their way in the first round. He's kind of in a bad spot. I don't know. He's shown decent enough to give him another year, but that's not what we're talking about, I guess.
No. So I mean, I'm pretty heavy on Georgia in this playoff. Really like the two that I talked about. I have a hard time ever doubting the abilities of Kirby Smart and moving on in a playoff, and I'm just very high on Gunnar Stockton. So I'm going to go with, again, I don't think this will be a high-scoring game either. I think this could be like a 27 game in favor of Georgia. So I'll go with that. I think Georgia advances. It will set up a fun semifinal matchups. But yeah, before we go, a little bit of an update. Not too many votes yet, but there are some votes in the segment we did. Life's too short to watch shitty football.
And I'm watching these votes. Unfortunately, Steve wanted to point out that my wife voted on this. So,
she did.
Please get more votes in. So I will probably not take that into consideration, but I will definitely watch.
It's very early on. Right now, it's 50% in favor of Alabama. Georgia Tech has 33%. And then there's a vote for other 17%. No one has voted for Rutgers, by the way. I wouldn't be surprised if Rutgers got shut out in this voting, if I'm going to be truthful.
Unless we pitch to Rutgers fans, odds are. And even then, I don't know.
Yeah. They might just feel bad for you and tell you to move on. If Rutgers gets shut out, I think you are obligated to pick another team.
I like I said, we've talked about it in different points. At one point in my life, I was a Virginia Tech follower. I wouldn't say I've ever been like that's not true. I'm a fan of college football. I think we've made that clear. I'm a fan of college football. I've aligned myself with different teams throughout time. I followed Nick Saban. I was a real Nick Saban fan. So I followed Alabama through the championship runs, and even then until he retired. And then when he retired, I kind of then dove more into Rutgers, got a little heavier into it. But it's also because I live 15 minutes from the school.
Yeah,
So
that's
let's put that, and so I wouldn't worry about Rutgers in this situation. I just like good football. Virginia Tech's got something that's very compelling going. Alabama, is got a really interesting situation. It seems like DeBoer's there to stay now. But also the other option, I would love for people to give us some ideas. I'm open. Tell us some schools. Just like throw some schools out there. If you throw a Big 12 school out there, you'll be blocked. Just to be clear.
what we really should have done was Oregon versus Michigan. We should have just let our fandom shown.
You should have, because at the end of the day, it would have been Biff Poggi against Dan Lanning. And that would have been people are probably thinking like, I love Biff.
Yeah, that would have been a fun
And
one.
Dan Lanning is one of the more interesting humans I've ever seen. Like, is he on drugs? Is he not? I don't know, but I want to run through a wall for him.
I mean,
he gets
on college game day, he stood up there on the chair and was singing "Shout."
Well,
listen, that's why there's the other option. We could put things in the other option.
Yeah.
So yeah, listen, I think we blast it out. More people come on, give us some ideas and give us a pitch. Tell us why. Tell us why I should root for the school that you think. Like, I am wide open. I would love to hear it.
Somebody's putting Texas Tech in there.
Yeah, 100%. The Big 12 love, it doesn't stop. Just not for us.
Don't listen.
There you have it. But yeah, that's an episode. That's a wrap. Keep voting on our poll. I will have more videos throughout the week so that we can continue this poll, and I will take a whole consensus into it so that we can get some percentages. I just want to throw out there, Mike, this is 2 straight weeks that your wife has given you her opinions. It was the she's not a Rutgers fan conversation that I posted today, and then she voted for Alabama. So I think she's.
But hold on a minute. Just to be clear, my wife, the team that she aligns with is no better. Just to be clear, my wife, if you ask her who she roots for, in air quotes, for football, it's Penn State. And that's not going to work for me. Like, I'll tell you right now, like, that's that's just not going to work. And her allegiance to Penn State is, I went to the Big 10 championship once. So like, nah.
Matt Campbell days, they're happening. So, and they.
Oh yeah, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to let the Matt Campbell days happen, and that's fine.
Hey,
let them keep happening.
You also had those colors in high school, by the way.
What, the Penn State? Yeah, no, I'm past it. If you could find me some middle school colors, that'd be pretty cool. Who's got blue and yellow? Delaware, yes.
I got
Let's go.
San Jose State.
No, I'm good.
What a boring.
Too close to the Big 12.
Yeah, but thank you to Dan Wolken for coming on of Yahoo Sports. Thanks to everyone who listened. Definitely give us your opinions on our social media pages and on our YouTube video of what you think the outcomes of this week's games will be. Should be fun ones. We'll be back after the quarterfinals to give you our thoughts on those games and talk about the semifinals. But that's a wrap.
Probably had some portal news too.
Yeah, a lot of portal news. January 2nd.
Yep, January 2nd. I think we might have to, do one on January 2nd.
Absolutely.
That's going to be the biggest day of the, I think most of these people that are out there are going to make their decisions on the 2nd.
Yeah, a lot of the bowl games will be wrapped up by then outside of the playoffs, so people can finally make a decision. A lot more people playing in their bowl games this year, which is nice to see.
Yep, it is good to see.
Outside of Penn State, who had 30 plus opt-outs, but
and Notre Dame, who opted out completely.
Oh, yeah, just completely.
Seriously, they should join the Big 12 just so everything's in one.
You know who else opted out completely? Rutgers.
Yeah, all right. You know what? You're right. I'm not even to defend them. You're right.
All right. We'll catch you guys next week. A lot more fun topics from the college football playoff and the portal right around the corner. So stay tuned with us. We'll see you soon.
See you later.